Chapter 11. Lucien Sterling rarely allowed anything to surprise him. But as his private investigator laid a sealed envelope across his desk, a ripple of unease stirred inside him. "Everything you asked for, Mr. Sterling," the man said, tapping the file with 2 fingers. "Background checks, employment history, family records. Thorough like always. Though," he hesitated, as if debating whether to say more. Lucien's gaze lifted. "Though what?" The man cleared his throat. "She's not just any waitress turned assistant. Her late father, David Cole, quietly held shares in Sterling Corporation. Old buried stock certificates, tucked away behind proxies. On paper it looks like nothing. But if contested," his voice trailed. Lucien dismissed him with a curt nod, but his grip on the envelope tightened. When the man left, silence pressed in, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Aria Cole. The girl who spilled coffee on his $1,000 suit. The woman who challenged him in boardrooms without flinching. The woman who made his pulse kick like no one else had in years. He should have ripped the envelope open immediately, devoured every line. Instead, he slid a finger beneath the seal, then stopped. His instinct screamed 2 things at once. Know everything and leave it alone. Lucien leaned back, the leather chair creaking. Her father, of course. He remembered the whispers from decades ago. A stubborn minority shareholder who refused to sell out during a hostile acquisition. David Cole. The name had been buried in boardroom dust. And now his daughter unknowingly worked under him. He tossed the envelope onto his desk as though it burned. The temptation to read it was sharp, almost primal. But something about it felt like opening a cage. If Aria discovered this, if she learned what power slept in her name, it could tear the company in half. Worse, it could shatter the fragile, combustible thing building between them. Lucien rubbed the bridge of his nose, muttering, "You don't even know what you're sitting on, do you?" 4 hours he worked around the file, ignoring it, refusing to let his gaze linger. But it sat there like a coiled snake, daring him. Eventually he stood, shoved it into the top drawer of his desk, and slammed it shut. Out of sight. Not out of danger. Because even locked away, the secret pulsed like a live wire. One wrong move, one curious glance from Aria, she'd find it. And when she did, she would know 2 truths. That she was far more than a disposable assistant, and that he had been investigating her from the start. The storm outside cracked, lightning flashing across the glass walls of his office. Lucien stared into the reflection of his own face, hard and shadowed. "Aria Cole," he whispered, the name foreign and dangerous on his tongue. "You're going to ruin me." In the silence, the desk drawer rattled softly as the building shook with thunder, as if the secret itself was desperate to be set free. Chapter 12. The diner was unusually quiet that night, the neon sign buzzing against the glass while rain tapped steadily against the window panes. Liam wiped down the counter with mechanical precision, lost in thought. His debts weighed heavily on him. Every loan shark's threat replayed in his head like a broken record. The bell above the door jingled. He didn't look up right away, expecting one of the regulars. But when he did, his throat tightened. Vivian Sterling stood in the doorway, elegance wrapped in a dark trench coat, her heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown to something inevitable. "Liam," she said smoothly, sliding onto a stool as though she belonged there. "We need to talk." He forced a laugh, setting down the rag. "Fancy seeing you here. This isn't your usual playground." Vivian's smile was thin. "I go where I must. Especially when someone I need keeps trying to avoid me." Liam swallowed hard. He had been hoping she'd let him slip through the cracks, but Vivian Sterling wasn't the kind to release her grip once she had it. She set her purse on the counter, snapped it open, and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Check. Its crisp edges gleamed under the overhead light. "You're in trouble," she said simply. "I know exactly how much. And I know the kind of people you owe. People who don't forgive." Liam's jaw tightened. "You've been keeping tabs on me." Of course, she replied smoothly. You're useful. And desperate men are the easiest to shape. He bristled. I'm not your puppet. No, Vivian leaned closer, her perfume sharp and cold. But you are her friend. And that makes you the perfect shield. Liam stiffened. He didn't need her to clarify who her was. Vivian's gaze glittered. Aria doesn't belong in Lucien's world. She's naive, reckless. And if she stays too close, she'll destroy everything, herself included. You don't want that for her, do you? Liam's mouth went dry. She's tougher than you think. Vivian's laugh was humorless. Tough. She's a waitress pretending she belongs in a boardroom. Men like Lucien Sterling chew through women like her without ever blinking. Her manicured fingers tapped the check. This is enough to wipe the slate clean, Liam. No more collectors at your door. No more broken bottles left as warnings. All you need to do is keep Aria in her lane. Convince her he isn't worth it. Keep her from dreaming too high. He stared at the paper. Freedom lay right there, a single pen stroke away. His debts would vanish, and with them the shadows that haunted his every step. But the cost, betraying Aria, poisoning her hope, twisted his stomach into knots. She'll hate me if she ever finds out. Vivian's lips curved in satisfaction. Better she hates you now than ruins herself later. You'll be doing her a kindness. Liam dragged a hand through his hair, fighting the sting in his eyes. You're asking me to break her. Vivian's voice softened, deceptively gentle. I'm asking you to protect her. In the only way that works. The check slid across the counter. Liam stared at it for a long time before snatching it up and stuffing it into his pocket. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. Later that night, Aria stopped by the diner, rain still dripping from her coat. She smiled faintly at Liam, her eyes tired from another grueling day at Sterling Tower. Rough shift, he asked, masking the turmoil in his voice. You could say that. She slid onto her usual stool. Lucien drives me insane. 1 second he's impossible, the next. She trailed off, shaking her head. I don't know what to make of him. Liam's throat tightened. Vivian's words pressed in on him. He could still feel the weight of that check in his pocket, burning against his leg. Aria, he began carefully. Guys like him don't risk everything for someone like you. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? His chest ached. You think he sees you as different. To him, you'll always be temporary. Her face hardened, though doubt flickered in her eyes. You don't know that. I know enough, he muttered, looking away. Silence stretched between them. Aria pushed back from the counter, hurt flashing across her face. Maybe you're wrong, Liam. Maybe he's not like everyone else. She left without finishing her coffee. Liam stood frozen, guilt gnawing at him. He had sounded protective, even brotherly, but the poison was already there. Vivian's poison. From the window, he watched her walk into the night, her figure swallowed by the rain as she headed back towards Sterling Tower. His fists clenched at his sides, torn between loyalty and survival. And for the first time, Liam wondered which would destroy him first, the debt or the lies. Chapter 13, The Ice Queen's Warning. Aria's POV. The Sterling Tower lobby gleamed like a jewel box, marble polished to a mirror shine, glass walls reflecting the blur of suits and heels rushing past. Aria kept her head down, clutching her bag as if it might shield her from the weight of belonging in a world that was never meant for her. She was halfway across the lobby when a familiar sound froze her mid-step, the sharp, deliberate click of designer heels. Vivian Sterling. Aria's stomach tightened. She remembered their first encounter in Lucien's office. Vivian's gaze, cool as ice, the way she dismissed her presence with veiled contempt. But this time the woman wasn't pretending she hadn't noticed her. She was walking straight toward her, every inch of her polished frame radiating intention. Miss Cole. Vivian's voice dripped with elegance, but it was elegance sharpened to a blade. Aria forced herself to meet her eyes. Mrs. Sterling. Vivian smiled, the kind of smile that could fool a camera but not the person standing inches away. "I've been watching you. It seems you've settled in here despite everything. Admirable, really. But a word of caution." Aria kept her chin lifted, refusing to give Vivian the satisfaction of seeing her falter. "And what would that be?" "Men like Lucien," Vivian said, her voice dropping into something softer, colder. "Don't forgive mistakes. They don't fall for charm. And they certainly don't risk their empire for someone like you. Best to quit while you're ahead." The words landed like a slap. Vivian didn't shout, didn't sneer, she didn't need to. Every syllable was precise, practiced, lethal. Aria's heart thudded painfully, but she forced her lips into a polite curve. "Thank you for the advice. But I've never been good at quitting." For the first time, Vivian's smile faltered, just slightly, before it snapped back into place. She leaned in, her perfume cloying and expensive. "Be careful, dear. Falling out of favor in this world can be devastating." With that, she pivoted and glided toward the waiting elevator, heels clicking like a metronome of menace. Aria stood rooted to the spot, her pulse racing. She hated that Vivian's words echoed in her mind even as she rode up to Lucien's floor. "Men like Lucien don't risk their empire for someone like you." She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she was stronger than this. But the seed had been planted, whether she liked it or not. Lucien's POV. Lucien's temper was already frayed from a brutal morning of meetings when his assistant mentioned, almost casually, "Oh, Mrs. Sterling stopped Miss Cole in the lobby earlier." The words hit him like a gunshot. He was out of his chair before he'd thought it through, striding down the corridor to Vivian's office. He didn't bother knocking. Vivian looked up from a set of papers, her expression smooth as glass. "Lucien, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "You spoke to her," he snapped. Vivian's brows arched delicately. "Is that against company policy now? Stay away from her." His voice was low, dangerous, the kind of tone that made board members back down. But Vivian wasn't a board member. She leaned back in her chair, crossing one elegant leg over the other. "She's fragile. Out of her depth. I was simply warning her. Saving you from a mess you'll have to clean up later." Lucien stepped closer, fury simmering under his skin. "Aria is none of your concern." Vivian's lips curved, sharp and knowing. "But she is, Lucien. You think I can't see it? She's already under your skin. And if you're not careful, she'll take more than you realize. She'll ruin you." For a split second, her words struck deeper than he wanted to admit. Because damn it, Aria was dangerous. To his control, to his carefully built walls. She had a way of making him want things he shouldn't. But Vivian wasn't going to dictate his life. Not now. Not ever. He leaned in, voice like steel. "Stay away from her." Vivian only smirked, unruffled. "You sound almost protective. How very dangerous." Lucien left before his temper snapped completely, but her parting words followed him down the corridor like smoke. Protective. Too far gone. And for the first time in years, Lucien wondered if she might be right. Aria stares out of the elevator doors as they open on Lucien's floor, Vivian's words still clinging to her like thorns. Meanwhile, Lucien leans against his desk, fists clenched, realizing with a jolt that Vivian had seen what he was barely admitting to himself. Aria wasn't just his assistant anymore. Chapter 14: Close Quarters. The sleek glass walls of the Sterling Tower conference room reflected Aria's own nerves back at her. She set down the stack of research papers and investor reports she had compiled, smoothing the pages as if neatness could steady the pounding of her heart. This pitch wasn't just another task. It was the kind of presentation that could either elevate her in Lucien's eyes or prove Vivian's poisonous whispers right. Lucien swept in a few moments later, his tailored suit immaculate, his presence commanding. He didn't so much enter a room as claim it. "You're late," he said, though his eyes flicked to the clock, which showed she wasn't. Aria bit her tongue. "I've prepared the investor profiles, the quarterly analysis, and projections for the next 3 years." She slid the documents across the table. Lucien glanced at them, then at her, his jaw tight. Let's hope your numbers are sharper than your attitude. The jab stung, but she refused to flinch. Numbers don't lie, Mr. Sterling. People do. The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a moment, silence stretched between them. His gaze sharpened, as if peeling back her layers one by one. Then, instead of snapping, he smirked, faintly but enough to unsettle her. Careful, Aria. You're starting to sound like me. Hours passed in a blur of revisions and tense exchanges. They sat across from each other, the glow of the city lights spilling in through the floor-to-ceiling windows as night deepened. Aria scribbled adjustments while Lucien dictated with precision. His voice low, steady, and, when he forgot himself, dangerously warm. Their shoulders brushed when they both reached for the same graph. She pulled back instantly, heat rising to her cheeks. He didn't move at first. His hand lingered on the paper, knuckles grazing her skin, until he finally withdrew as if burned. Focus, he muttered, but the word sounded like an order to himself. By midnight, exhaustion blurred her thoughts. Aria leaned back in her chair, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, unaware of how closely Lucien was watching her. Her blouse was slightly wrinkled, ink smudged her fingers, but in that imperfection lay a vitality that his world of polish and power lacked. You don't give up easily, do you? He asked quietly. She met his eyes, surprised by the softness in his tone. Not when something matters. Something flickered in him then, something she couldn't name. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on the table between them. The air charged, pulling her in. Her breath caught. This close, she could see the faint scar near his jawline, the way his lashes cast shadows over his sharp cheekbones. His scent, clean, expensive, and undeniably masculine, wrapped around her, dizzying. Their gazes locked, and for a heartbeat, nothing existed but the space between their lips. Aria's pulse thundered as he tilted slightly closer, his breath brushing her skin. But then, his hand curled into a fist. Lucien pulled back abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His expression hardened, shutters slamming down over whatever had just flickered through him. This is a waste of time, he said, gathering the documents with clipped efficiency. Get some rest. We'll finalize the pitch tomorrow. Aria stared, confused, her chest aching with an unnamed longing. He didn't look at her again as he strode out of the room, leaving only the echo of his footsteps, and the question of what he was so desperately trying to fight. In his office, Lucien opened the drawer and pulled out the sealed envelope containing Aria's file. He stared at it, jaw tight, the memory of her closeness still burning in his veins. With a sharp exhale, he shoved it back into the drawer, locking it. Dangerous, he muttered to himself. She's more dangerous than she knows. Chapter 15, Breaking Point. The investor hall buzzed with sharp suits, sharper smiles, and vultures circling for weakness. Aria stood just behind Lucien, her notepad in hand, though she already knew the presentation by heart. Every slide, every number, every pivot, they had practiced until her brain ached. But preparation didn't stop sabotage. Halfway through Lucien's pitch, a rival investor, a smug veteran named Caldwell, interrupted with a cutting remark. Sterling Corp's growth is inflated. Your last quarter dipped, didn't it? The room turned. It sharpened. Doubt rippled through the air. Lucien's jaw flexed, but before he could answer, Aria stepped forward. Calm, clear, unflinching. The dip was a strategic move. Funds were reallocated into the upcoming expansion, one that you'll all profit from once the numbers mature. She clicked to the hidden slide she'd insisted they prepare, the graph lighting up the screen with proof. A murmur of approval swept through the room. Caldwell's smirk faltered. Lucien turned his head, just slightly. Their eyes met. For once, his shield cracked, and the smallest spark of gratitude, and something far more dangerous, flashed through. By the end of the pitch, the investors applauded and shook. Sterling Corp stood taller than before. Later, when the crowd dispersed and the city glowed beyond the glass walls, Lucien shut the door of the empty conference room. The silence between them hummed louder than applause. "You saved me out there," he said finally, his voice low. Aria's chest tightened. "We saved each other." The tension snapped. One moment they stood apart. The next, Lucien closed the distance, his mouth crushing against hers. It wasn't careful this time. It wasn't measured. It was weeks of fire, fury, and denial, all combusting into a kiss that left them both breathless. Aria gasped against his lips, her hands fisting in his jacket. He lifted her onto the sleek glass table, knocking papers aside. His touch was everywhere, rough, urgent, worshipful. "Lucien," she whispered, half protest, half plea. "Don't say my name," he growled against her throat, as if even that was too intimate, too exposing. Yet his body betrayed him, pressing closer, hungrier. Clothes fell away in a tangle. Skin met skin, hot and desperate. Against the backdrop of glittering city lights, they crossed the line they had fought so hard to hold. Every kiss, every gasp, every movement was reckless, raw, inevitable. When it was over, silence returned, thick, heavy, dangerous. Aria lay curled against him, her breath ragged, her skin still tingling. For the first time, Lucien didn't immediately pull away. He just stared down at her, his expression unreadable, his heartbeat pounding against hers. But inside, war raged. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to matter. And yet, as Aria drifted, exhausted, in his arms, Lucien stared at the ceiling, fighting emotions he had sworn long ago to bury. "What have I done?" he thought, tightening his hold around her despite himself. Chapter 16. The night they can't undo. The night stretched on, long after the applause from the pitch had faded and the city settled into its restless hum. Lucien's penthouse was hushed, bathed in moonlight that slipped between the curtains. From this high above the city, the streets below looked like glowing veins of light, pulsing with life, but in here, the world was narrowed to two people. The adrenaline had long since cooled, but in its place lingered something heavier, more dangerous. Desire had been the spark that set them ablaze, but now, in the silence that followed, something else took root, something Lucien had spent years running from. Aria lay tangled in the sheets, her chest rising and falling softly, her skin still warm from his touch. She had never felt this exposed, this seen, this fragile. And yet, oddly, she didn't want to run. What terrified her wasn't the heat of his body or the intensity of his eyes when he moved above her. No, it was the tenderness that had crept in when she least expected it. The way his fingers had lingered, memorizing her, almost worshipping her, even when his kiss was hungry and his body desperate. He had said her name like it cost him something, like letting it slip from his lips gave away too much of himself. She'd seen him crack then, seen the man beneath the billionaire, the one no one else got close to, the one who terrified her because she wanted him more than she should. Now, in the afterglow, his hand traced the slope of her arm, the dip of her waist, idle and aimless, as if he couldn't quite stop himself. He wasn't touching her with the same urgency as before. He was touching her like he needed proof she was real, that this moment had actually happened. She stirred, caught in the haze between sleep and waking, and her voice slipped out, slurred but soft. "You don't always have to be the monster, you know." The words punched the air from his lungs. Lucien froze, staring down at her. She didn't know, couldn't know. But she had said it like she believed it, like she saw through him in ways no one else dared to. And she trusted him. That was the knife in the ribs. She trusted him. He lowered his head, pressing his lips against her hairline, a gesture so uncharacteristically tender it startled even him. "Sleep," he whispered, though his voice cracked faintly at the edges. And she did. Slowly, peacefully, her breathing deepened. Her walls lowered entirely in a way they never had before. She curled closer against him like he was safe, like he was the answer. Lucien lay perfectly still, but inside, his chest was a battlefield. He stared at the ceiling, jaw clenched, every muscle locked against the tide of memory and guilt threatening to drown him. The silence was suffocating because it left him alone with the truth, the one thing he had buried in that desk drawer. The file. Even now, he could picture it in perfect detail. Her name typed neatly at the top, her father's legacy attached to her like an inheritance she had no idea existed. Her father, once a quiet but powerful shareholder in Sterling Corporation. Her bloodline tied to the empire he had sworn to protect at any cost. And he hadn't told her. The thought of her finding out made his stomach twist painfully. He could see it too vividly. The betrayal in her eyes, the way her soft trust would shatter into jagged glass. Her voice cutting sharper than any rival when she spat the words. Asterisk, you knew, Lucien. You knew and you lied to me, asterisk. For a brief moment, he let himself imagine telling her, laying it all bare. Her reaction. Would she hate him? Walk away? Or worse, stay not because she wanted him, but because of what she'd inherited? Well, he couldn't let that happen. He couldn't let her look at him differently. Not when, for the first time in years, he felt like more than just the ruthless heir to Sterling. Not when she made him feel like a man again, not just a weapon. Fear coiled in his gut, bitter and relentless. Fear of losing her. Fear of losing the empire. Fear of becoming that man again. Alone, untouchable, hollow. So he said nothing. Instead, he pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her possessively, his body curling to shield hers from the world. She trusted him enough to sleep in his arms. That had to be enough. But even as he held her, Lucien knew it was temporary. He knew this peace was borrowed, fragile. In the dark, his lips brushed her hair as he whispered words she would never hear. If you ever find out, you'll never forgive me. Chapter 17. Whispers of Betrayal. The cafe where Aria and Liam usually met felt colder that afternoon. Sunlight spilled across the little wooden table, but neither of them touched their drinks. Aria stirred hers absent-mindedly, eyes still bright with the glow of recent days. Late nights in Sterling Tower, Lucien's rare smiles, the way her ideas had been heard, respected. Liam noticed it all, and it gutted him. You're different lately, he said finally, his voice rough. Walking around like you've won the world. Tell me, is that because of him? Aria blinked, caught off guard. Lucien. He's my boss, Liam. And yes, he's hard, but he pushes me to be better. I'm learning more in weeks than I ever thought I could. Liam leaned forward, elbows on the table, his tone sharpening. You think he's pushing you to be better? No, Aria. He's pulling you into his world. And when men like him pull you in, they don't let go until you're nothing but dust. Her brows drew together, anger stirring. That's unfair. You don't know him like I do. I know enough. Liam's words lashed out, harsher than he intended. Guys like Lucien don't fall in love. They consume. They use. And when they're done, they spit you out and leave you worse than before. Silence fell. Aria's chest rose and fell, heat rushing to her cheeks. She wanted to argue, to scream, but her heart ached with the sting of betrayal from her best friend. You sound just like everyone else who underestimates me, she said, voice trembling. Do you think I can't tell the difference between being used and being seen? Because Lucien sees me, Liam. Maybe more than you ever did. Her words cut deep. Liam flinched, guilt flashing before anger drowned it out. Aria pushed back her chair. If you can't trust me to make my own choices, maybe you don't know me at all. Without waiting for his reply, she walked away, the bell above the cafe door jingling faintly as she left. Liam sat frozen, staring at the untouched coffee between his hands. He felt the friendship slipping, years of loyalty unraveling thread by thread. Later that night, Vivian's perfume filled the quiet corners of his apartment before her voice did. She moved through the space as though she owned it, silk scarf trailing from her neck like a banner of victory. You're failing, Liam, she said smoothly. She's falling deeper into his orbit. I tried, Liam muttered. She doesn't listen. His throat tightened. She's not the same Aria anymore. Vivian's smile was slow, indulgent. Of course she's not. Lucien has that effect. But you can still save her. She leaned closer, her words a velvet knife. Tell her the truth. He looked up sharply. Truth? What truth? That if she knew what Lucien is capable of, what secrets he hides, she'd never forgive him. Vivian's eyes glittered, unreadable. Do you want to watch her break, or will you be the one to protect her? Liam's pulse thundered in his ears. Protect her. Save her. The words clung to him, poisoned honey in his blood. He didn't know what Vivian's endgame was, not really. But she was right about one thing. If Aria learned something dark about Lucien, it would destroy her. And maybe he could be the one to keep that from happening. Alone after Vivian left, Liam sat in the dim glow of the lamp, fists clenched. He whispered to himself, almost as if confessing, maybe she needs to hear it from me, before it's too late. Chapter 18, Cracks Appear. Aria had grown used to Lucien's sharp edges, the clipped tone, the ruthless focus, the way he commanded a room with nothing more than a glance. But lately, something about him had shifted. Some days he was distant, locking himself in meetings or staring out the window as if haunted by ghosts only he could see. Other times he became overbearing, his protectiveness crossing into a brand of possessiveness that made her bristle. Like today. She had brushed past him in the hallway after a tense meeting, joking, "What's with you, Sterling? You're more secretive than the CIA." She'd expected the usual dry retort, maybe even that smirk she was coming to recognize as his version of amusement. Instead he'd snapped, "Don't push me, Aria." The sharpness in his voice cut straight through her chest, silencing the laugh on her lips. She had blinked at him, startled, and he'd immediately turned on his heel, leaving her standing in the corridor, heat burning her face. The words echoed long after he'd gone. That night, she found herself alone in his office. Lucien had stormed out after a phone call, muttering something about handling it personally, and left her with a pile of files that didn't actually need her attention. She tried to work, but her mind kept circling back to the man who had kissed her with raw hunger only nights ago, who had whispered her name in the dark like it meant too much. And yet here he was now, cold, unreadable, and hiding something. Her gaze drifted to his desk. She knew better. She wasn't the type to snoop, and yet the thought had been nagging her for days. There was something in the way he locked that bottom drawer every time he left, something in the way his hand lingered near it, as though it contained not just papers but pieces of himself he couldn't risk showing. Her heart thudded as she stood and crossed the room. "Don't," she whispered to herself. "Don't be that girl. He'll kill you if he finds out." But her fingers hovered anyway, brushing the cold metal of the drawer handle. The temptation was unbearable. She told herself she was just curious, that she wasn't actually going to open it. Still, she curled her hand around the edge, her pulse loud in her ears. It was heavy, locked, but not impenetrable. Her hand lingered, trembling, as though the drawer itself was breathing secrets against her skin. The door clicked. "Step away." Lucien's voice was low, lethal, vibrating through the silence like the crack of thunder. Aria jerked, spinning around. He stood in the doorway, his coat still on, shadows clinging to him as if he'd dragged the storm inside with him. His eyes weren't cold marble anymore. They were fire, burning, dangerous. I wasn't doing anything," she stammered, releasing the handle. He shut the door behind him with deliberate slowness, the sound echoing like a lock sealing her fate. He didn't approach her, didn't raise his voice again. Instead, he stared, long, unblinking, until her skin prickled under the weight of it. Her throat worked as she swallowed. For the first time since meeting him, she wondered if she had just glimpsed a version of Lucien Sterling no one was ever supposed to see. And worse, part of her wasn't sure if she wanted to know more, or run before it was too late. The silence between them was a razor, poised to cut. Chapter 19. The Pull of the Past. The storm outside mirrored the tension in Lucien's office. Aria stood at the edge of his desk, fingers brushing the brass handle of a drawer she wasn't meant to notice. Lucien's phone call had dragged him briefly into the hall, leaving her alone. Her curiosity, that restless need to piece together what he always kept hidden, had pulled her closer. But just as she slipped her hand to the drawer, the door opened. Lucien's voice cut through the quiet. "Aria!" He froze. His gaze flicked from her hand to the desk. For a beat, neither of them spoke. Then, without rushing, Lucien crossed the room and placed his palm over the drawer. He closed it with a deliberate snap, his jaw tight. "We're late," he said evenly, as if nothing had happened. "For what?" Aria asked, searching his face. "An urgent call. We're needed in the West Wing." His tone left no room for argument, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't just redirecting her. He was hiding something. Aria let him guide her out of the office, but the silence between them was different this time. It wasn't the charged quiet of unspoken desire, nor the wary distance of employer and employee. It was a silence that carried weight, like secrets pressing against glass, threatening to crack. "What are you hiding from me, Lucien Sterling?" Down the hall, Vivian watched them pass. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, the tension in Lucien's stride, the suspicion darkening Aria's face. For weeks she had tested the girl, probing for weaknesses. But Liam's hesitation, Lucien's warnings, and Aria's sheer persistence had drawn a conclusion Vivian couldn't ignore. Aria Cole was dangerous. Too dangerous. In her private suite later that evening, Vivian poured herself a glass of red wine and picked up the phone. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window was sharp, her lipstick an unbroken slash of crimson. "She's not going anywhere," Vivian said coldly into the receiver. "Not by persuasion. Not by fear. You know what that means." The voice on the other end murmured something low and affirming. Vivian smiled faintly, swirling her wine. "She reminds me of her father," she added almost idly. "Too brave for his own good. And look where that got him." Across the city, Aria sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts spinning. She replayed Lucien's expression in his office, the way his hand had snapped that drawer shut like a door on a secret. He had been careful, too careful. Her instincts whispered that whatever lay inside mattered. And not just to him. To her. But she couldn't shake Liam's recent words either. "Guys like him don't risk everything for someone like you." The memory stung now more than ever. Because despite everything, she wanted to believe Lucien was different. That what happened between them meant something real. But the drawer. The drawer was proof that he was hiding pieces of himself, and maybe of her too. Vivian moved to her desk, pulling out a leather-bound folder. Inside was a board. Photographs, reports, pieces of history she'd long since rewritten to her advantage. At the center had once been a man's face. Aria's father. A threat she'd eliminated years ago. Now, with a slow, precise hand, she pinned a photo of Aria in his place. Her lips curved in satisfaction as she studied the image. The girl's defiance wasn't a liability. It was a fire that could spread if not snuffed out. Vivian leaned back in her chair, her wine glass gleaming in the dim light. "History has a way of repeating itself," she murmured. "Unless someone writes the ending." Back at Sterling Tower, Lucien stood by his office window, city lights stretching like veins of gold beneath him. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion seeping into his bones. The file in his drawer weighed on him like an anchor. Aria's name. Her father's shares. The truth that tied her to the empire she didn't even know she belonged to. And Vivian. He knew she wouldn't stay idle for long. When the knock came at his door, Lucien didn't turn immediately. "What is it?" "Just me." Aria's voice was soft. He looked over, her presence tightening something in his chest. For a moment, he considered telling her everything. About the file, about Vivian, about the danger curling closer every day. But her eyes held trust, fragile and unguarded. If he shattered it now, he might lose her forever. So he swallowed the truth and simply said, You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult. Aria studied him for a long moment before nodding. But as she left, the unease only grew stronger. Both of them knew something was coming. Neither could name it. But in the shadows of Sterling Tower, Vivian already had. Chapter 20 Lines crossed. Lucien had a way of filling a room without trying. Even now, long past working hours with the tower half asleep around them, he carried that same presence, commanding, consuming. Aria stood on the other side of his desk, clutching a stack of reports she hadn't even glanced at. Her pulse was everywhere. In her throat, in her fingertips, in the place low in her stomach that tightened whenever his eyes lingered too long. Numbers look solid, she managed, placing the files down. The investors won't have much to argue with. Lucien leaned against the edge of the desk, hands braced behind him, watching her with that unreadable stare. His tie was loosened, his shirt sleeves rolled, the kind of casual she rarely saw on him. It made her throat dry. She pretended to adjust her pen. Anything to keep her hands busy. Anything to stop herself from staring at the vein in his forearm or the way his collar dipped, revealing a hint of skin. But she felt it, the current between them, sharp and electric. When she finally looked up, his gaze was already on her. Intense. Hungry. "Stop looking at me like that," she whispered, not meaning for it to slip out. His lips curved, a slow, dangerous smile. "Like what?" "Like you," she faltered, because finishing the thought meant admitting what burned in her chest. Lucien didn't move, but the space between them grew smaller anyway. She could feel him pulling her in. His gravity impossible to resist. When he finally reached for her, the world fell away. His mouth was hot, urgent against hers. The kiss wasn't polite or careful. It was desperate, acclaiming. Aria gasped into him, her body yielding before her mind could catch up. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back as if he couldn't bear even a breath of distance between them. She clung to his shirt, the fabric bunching under her fists. She wanted to hate how much she wanted him, but the truth blazed too bright. She was lost in him. When he finally broke the kiss, both of them breathing hard, she whispered, "What are we doing, Lucien?" For once, he didn't have an immediate answer. She searched his face, and what she saw unsettled her more than his silence. Desire, yes, but also hesitation. Fear. Secrets. "You're holding back," she said softly. "Don't lie. I can feel it." His jaw tightened, the muscle feathering. "If you want me," she continued, her voice trembling, "then be honest with me. Don't hide from me." The silence stretched. His eyes flicked toward the drawer in his desk, just for a heartbeat, but she caught it. Lucien's grip on her arms tightened. He almost spoke. She could see it in the parting of his lips, in the way his throat worked as he swallowed something heavy. But then, as if slamming a door shut, his gaze hardened. "You're imagining things," he said, voice even too even. "You make me lose control, that's all." Aria froze. It was an answer, but not the right one. Not the truth she felt thrumming beneath his skin. Her chest ached as she pulled back. "You're lying to me, Aria." His tone was sharp, warning, but she shook her head. "No. You don't get to tell me I'm imagining things when I can feel you pulling away." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking for just a moment. Then his phone buzzed on the desk, slicing the tension. He seized it like a lifeline. "Sterling!" He barked into the receiver, turning from her. And just like that she was dismissed. Across town, Liam sat hunched over a glass of whiskey, staring at the amber liquid like it might hold answers. His debts were a noose, one he'd been tugging against for months. Vivian hadn't just reminded him of the rope, she'd tightened it. "You want to protect her, don't you?" her voice had purred earlier. "Then keep her away from Sterling. Feed him reasons to see her as weak. Better a bruised ego than a broken heart." He wanted to resist. God, he wanted to. But when a Sterling exec at the bar joked about Lucien's charity case assistant, Liam's tongue betrayed him. Charity case. She's smart, sure, but she screwed up just last week. Misfiled reports. Nearly cost them a meeting. It was a small thing, insignificant even. But in the hands of sharks, blood in the water never stayed small. By the next morning, the whispers had spread. She's in over her head. Lucien's babysitting her. She won't last a month. Aria felt it the moment she stepped into the office. The stares, the murmurs. Each one a tiny cut. Death by 1,000 whispers. When she overheard 2 assistants snickering about her rookie mistake, her stomach dropped. That error had been buried, fixed. Only someone close could have leaked it. Her heart hurt in a way Lucien's half-truths never had. Because Liam wasn't just a friend. He was her safe place. The one person she thought she could always count on. That night, back in her apartment, the weight of it all came crashing down. Lucien with his secrets and evasions. Liam with his betrayal dressed as protection. She curled on the couch, hugging her knees, fighting tears. If I can't trust them, she whispered into the dark, then who can I trust? The silence gave no answer. Only the cracks widening, threatening to break her world apart. Alone in the quiet, she realized the truth she didn't want to admit. Whatever was coming next would destroy her heart, one way or another. Thanks for listening to Lamlam Audiobooks. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more episodes. Until next time, keep listening.